Listeners to the programme will be familiar with the case of Jonathan Heafy. At the time, it was quite controversial locally. Just outline for me again why the case was taken and what it was about.
Well, as you're aware, Mr. Heafy's currently sentenced. He's a sentenced prisoner in Cork Prison. Back in 2017, while serving this sentence, he was diagnosed with a brain tumour. He had to undergo major brain surgery and a course of intense chemotherapy after that. So in light of that, an application was made for what's called compassionate temporary release to allow Mr. Heafy to be at home whilst undergoing the chemotherapy. Yeah. This was after the surgery had taken place. This application was refused by the minister. So essentially what happens is you make an application and then by statute, the minister is the one that makes the decision as to whether or not someone should be released on compassionate grounds.
Yeah.
So the minister in making this decision felt that Mr. Heafy's care needs could still be catered for in the prison whilst undergoing the treatment of chemotherapy. So that was refused. So on the basis of that refusal, Mr. Heafy had instructed our office, and in light of that we made a number of requests to the Governor and the Irish Prison Service and the Minister, asking them to reconsider this decision. Yeah. The Governor essentially refused to reconsider the decision to grant Mr. Heafy's release. So based on that refusal to reconsider the decision, judicial review proceedings in the High Court in Dublin were issued. It arose during those proceedings that the Governor, in a number of applications which were made on behalf of Mr. Heafy, had failed to refer these requests to the Director of Operations of the Irish Prison Service. So although the legislation says that it's the Minister, it can be the Director of Operations. He's lawfully able to make these decisions on behalf of the Minister. So in effect, the Governor himself had been acting as a type of gatekeeper, short-circuiting, as it were, the proper and lawful decision-making process as provided for, as I mentioned, in the statute.
So is that saying, Michael, that the Governor of the prison was making decisions he didn't have a right to make?
Exactly, yes. So he was unlawfully making a decision and failing to refer the application, as it were, to the Director of Operations and or the Minister for Justice. So he was short-circuiting, as I was saying, the proper and lawful decision-making process which is provided for in the statute. So that was one of the main arguments in which was raised in the judicial review proceedings. And Mr. Justice Binchy, whilst delivering judgment, said our client was therefore entitled to a declaration in his favour concerning how these particular applications were handled by the Governor at the time.
Yeah. What are the implications of this decision for your client?
Well, I think the case highlights generally the particular safeguards which are provided for prisoners when these applications are being made for compassionate temporary release. As I mentioned briefly, it's the Minister's responsibility to make the decision ultimately. The Governor has no power in refusing to make a decision for release. So in applications, and the applications in this case should have been sent forward in compliance with this decision-making process. So, as I said, the Governor had acted unlawfully in relation to that. So,
Could this have implications for the Governor, Michael? Or the prison management in general?
The provisions were already in place by way of statute. It was just that the Governor had acted unlawfully and how he was meant to deal with those particular applications. I can't really comment on how other applications are made, so I can only comment on these particular ones.
Yeah, but I mean, if the man acted outside of his remit, is there a comeback?
Well, we were really only looking for those particular applications, and in those particular applications for Mr. Heafy, he had acted unlawfully. So, okay. I mean, when the court was giving judgment, agreeing with us on that, they had highlighted, that although it may affect Mr. Heafy in the future if he had to make any other applications, but prisoners also generally who may apply for temporary release for grounds of ill health. So I suppose it highlights particularly who should be making the decision for these applications and ensuring that people like the Governor are not usurping their decision-making powers.
Yeah. Have you had an opportunity to talk to Mr. Heafy or his family since?
Well, I've spoken, judgment was given yesterday morning. I was able to speak to Mr. Heafy's family after, shortly just explaining the circumstances and the fact that the judicial review was ultimately won. Obviously, the family feel aggrieved that these particular applications that we're talking about were being refused unlawfully by the Governor. I mean, it is a difficult time for anyone.
Yeah. How is he? Do you know? How's his state of health?
I understand that he is stable at this stage. I know that he's due for release shortly, and I think that's the family's main concern in just getting him home at this stage.
Yeah.
Obviously, looking back, they're aggrieved because this type of treatment that he was undergoing in prison, it can be difficult for anyone and for anyone's family. So to have to deal with that in a custodial sentence or in a custodial setting, obviously had a major impact on him and his family.